Welcome to episode number 37 of the Marine Layer podcast with TJ Mathewson and Lyle Goldstein. On today's pod, we'll recap the first couple of days of All-Star Week. Of course, by the time this comes out, you'll know everything that happened, but we were there to experience it all. We'll talk about some of our favorite things from the first couple of days. Be sure to stay tuned to our social channels for some of our content that comes out related to all this throughout the next couple of weeks. We have our now two Mariners storylines now that we're to 2 episodes a week. We'll go down on the farm and we'll recap the Futures Game. We were there on Saturday, and we'll tell you what we saw from Harry Ford and Jonatan Clase. We'll go around baseball with our MLB Wraparound, another Russell Wilson Umpire of the Week, and we'll close out the show with Speak Your Mind.
You heard TJ mention our social media channels. If you're not already, go over to Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts. Give us a follow at Marine Layer Pod, especially right now. With it being All-Star Week, we're pumping out a ton of content. You're not going to want to miss it. We think it's some really cool stuff, so be sure to head over there. In terms of our full podcasts, go over to Apple and Spotify if you're watching on YouTube, and go give us a download, rate it, review it. Same thing if you're listening on the audio platforms. Go watch us on YouTube too with our full video podcast. Rate, review, subscribe, give us 5 stars. Be sure to check us out everywhere.
Let's get it rolling. And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, recording late at night here on Sunday, July 9th. And if you can't hear it in my voice, we've had a lot of fun the first 2 days of All-Star Week. The Futures Game was Saturday. The draft was today. We've had a blast through the first couple of days of these All-Star Week festivities. It is so good to have the game back here.
It's so cool that it's back in Seattle. We've waited forever for this. We don't have any memory of it back in 2001 or barely any when it was here all those years ago, 20 plus years ago. But to actually get to experience it now in real time. Oh, by the way, with it being the inaugural year of this podcast, it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And just a reminder to all those listening, wondering why I didn't announce a guest in the intro when we said, okay, now that we're officially going to 2 podcasts a week, we're going to have our guest episode come out on Wednesday, and we're going to have a full podcast episode with all the topics on Friday. Well, due to some scheduling issues with Joe Doyle, who we will have on the podcast releasing on Friday, where we're going to cover the Mariners' entire draft. It's going to be a fun conversation with Joe. We got to talk to him today, but some scheduling some scheduling complications with Joe lead us to, we're just going to push him to Friday's episode. So that'll be our guest episode. Everything MLB draft. We saw the first 2 rounds today. We'll just mention the fact that the Mariners drafted Cole Emerson, Johnny Farmelo. What a last name. That's a great last name. Ty Pete and Ben Williamson with their first 4 picks, the first 3 in the first round, and Ben Williamson, a bit of a money saver in the second round. We'll get Joe's thoughts on that on Friday when we release that episode. Should be good. We'll have a lot more to comb through as well with some of the later rounds. But we went to a draft watch party today with our partners at Just Baseball. Phenomenal eBay trading card event at Gantry Public House next to the stadium. Was a really fun environment. Got to see all the guys all together, and it was a fun experience.
We were really, really happy to be a part of it. We weren't sure how the turnout was going to be. Of course, you can't know before you actually get there. It was really good. There was people filing in all throughout the day, doing some card trading. There was food and drinks. There was giveaways. It was really fun. In fact, I wasn't expecting this, but they kind of handed us off the mic at one point to help give away a prize of some cards to a listener. And they just handed us the mic because there's a bunch of Mariners fans in there. And they go, hey, these are our guys at the Marine Layer podcast. They're new to Just Baseball. We're going to have them ask you guys a trivia question. And I kind of had to think on the spot, what in the world am I going to ask? And I'm sitting there, okay, what's not too hard? What's not too easy? I'm thinking. So I went with how many All-Stars were in the All-Star game the last time it was here in 2001, which was good. Nobody got it right away. And then eventually somebody landed on the 8 and they won the prize. But yeah, it was a blast. The Just Baseball guys were doing a live stream of the draft the entire time. We hopped on when the Mariners picked, which was pretty fun. Yeah, it was really, really a cool event.
And that's why I think it's such great timing that we joined the Just Baseball Podcast Network when we did, because they're all here in Seattle, or most of them are. I mean, We've gotten to see Jack for the first time in years, Arm for the first time in years. You and I had never met Peter before, so it's really good to meet Peter, Will as well, Colby, and then two people from Den of Geek who they partner with. Chris and Jess were there as well. And it's really good to meet all the people who make Just Baseball happen, which now in small part make us happen as well. And it was great to have everyone together. Sat together for the Futures game on Saturday, and then again for today was the draft watch party. We'll try and catch up with them as well on Monday or Tuesday. It's going to be pretty crowded for the Derby and the All-Star game, so might not be quite as easy, but we'll do our best. And I don't know, dog, I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days. It's going to be fun. Everyone listening to this is going to know if Julio won the home run derby, but the anticipation right now, we don't know.
We don't know. We don't know at all. So we're just sitting here hoping. We're hoping he starts lifting the ball a lot, and hey, maybe that turns his second half around. But I'll tell you, seeing Harry Ford get the ovation that he got during the Futures game, it only makes me that much more excited for Julio, because you had Mariners fans in there. The Futures game wasn't filled up or anything with 50,000 people. There's people chanting Harry, Harry, Harry as he's out there. I'm thinking, if they're going like this, if they're chanting like this for Harry Ford, what is it going to be like for Julio Monday night?
Did that give you hope for people in the pen? Your general fan in the pen. Did that give you hope that they might actually know a little bit more what you're talking about?
The fact they knew who Harry Ford was is a win in itself. That is a win in itself. However, I don't know if our data points are skewed because it's All-Star week without our usual people in the pen.
We've talked to some great people in the pen. Don't get us wrong. I mean, across our social channels, we really have talked to some great people. But, Lyle and I tend to agree that your general super, super, super casual fan that hangs out in the pen might not know who the Mariners' top 30 prospects are, and that's totally okay. But then to see Harry, we're standing there to see Harry walking out to the bullpen, and we're standing there kind of in the back of the pen, and they're chanting, and you and I look at it, I was like, what the fuck are they talking? Who are they chanting to? Like, this is the Futures game. And then Harry's like, yeah, he was having a good time.
That was great. I mean, the fact they gave him the applause and everything, I think it was cool for him, and it was certainly cool for the fans. Yeah, I had a blast watching the Futures game. I'll tell you what, I got a kick out of the celebrity softball game for the few innings we were there. We've been going back and forth about this all week. TJ hates the celebrity softball game.
A waste of time.
I was eager to see Felix getting at bat, so I enjoyed it.
What did he do with his at-bat? I don't even remember.
Well, he hit a home run later in the game, but you had forced us to leave at that point, so I didn't get to see that in person.
Right. Good.
But in the at-bat he had, I think he hit like a ground ball single. We saw Brett Boone hit a home run and Mike Cameron, but not Felix.
Not to slight Felix. He did pick right up where he left off, giving up 2 runs in the top of the first.
Yeah, that's quite the way to treat a hometown legend when he comes home. Is instead of the warm welcomes and cheers, he just like, well, I see you're still giving up runs.
I try not to be too hard at Felix, but if he ever feels offended by his words, he can say, okay, so I'll look at my bank account and you can look at yours. Yes. And then we'll see who's actually happy here. And then I'm like, you know what? You have a pretty good point. That's good. Yeah. It was cool seeing all those celebrities there. I had no idea Mina was going to be there. Mina was there. Kenny Mayne was there. I just hear Kenny Mayne's voice come over the intercom. I'm like, what?
I would say those two are a couple of white whales of this podcast too, in the sense of if we could ever get them on, that is a huge win.
Yeah, I'm glad Mina was there. Like, doesn't she have NFL Live tomorrow?
Maybe, but she made the time for it, and I'm not shocked. I mean, she's a Seattle fan through and through, so I'm sure they wanted her to be a part of it, and I'm sure she was more than happy to fly up from LA and be a part of it, because that is where she's from, right? Or not from, but she's in LA right now.
Mm-hmm. I wish they put her in the lineup. It was a real shame.
That would have been fun. Meanwhile, I mean, we're sitting here Sunday night. We're only halfway through this thing, and the best 2 days are ahead. We're a little exhausted, aren't we? I mean, we're sitting here pushing through this podcast because, I mean, 1, we love it, and 2, we're doing it for you guys. We want to get the content out there, and we don't want to miss shows ever. But we are tired. Like, this stuff will drain you. Being out in the sun all day, walking around, being on your feet, it's tiring.
My voice will sound infinitely worse when we record Friday's episode. Infinitely worse. So
worse.
Just beware. I'm going to have to drink some tea here. I need some voice recovery. I'm just not very, for those who haven't picked up on it yet, in social gatherings, I'm not very efficient at voice management. So maybe sometimes I need to just dial it down a little bit, just a little bit. So you can imagine when, we had 75 people packed into the back room of Gantry's today, Gantry, and the music's blaring and people are talking and I'm just trying to have a conversation. I'm talking really loudly. And sometimes it just happens a little bit too much. But honestly, maybe it was Cowgirls too. Actually, you know what? I think it was Cowgirls. I'll blame Cowgirls.
I was going to say, I think it's more of that. So for those who don't know, Cowgirls is the go-to bar after Mariners games. There's a mechanical bull. It's kind of like a nightclub. We've been there a couple times, and we figured on Saturday night we were going to be home by 9 o'clock, go to bed early, and just rest and recover for the next day. But we're with some of these Just Baseball people, and they said, do you want to go to Cowgirls? We said, I guess so. And 9 o'clock then turned into 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. I think we got back to TJ's house around 12. I think I got home around 1, got to bed as fast as possible and tried to get some sleep for the next day being Sunday. But now we're sitting here on Sunday night recording our podcast. It's now 10:45 p.m. So yeah, they're long days. They're really fun days, but they've ended up being long.
I think my kryptonite, honestly, is tequila and sing-along music. That I think that's where we're going to narrow it down to.
That sounds about right. I think that's about spot on.
I will say Cowgirls, even though it was fun the second time, I did like your music selection when we went back in the first weekend of the season. I thought it was a little more consistent. That's all. Only thing I have to pass off. We do have some actual Mariners stuff to talk about, Lyle, as we get into our now 2 Mariners storylines here in the shortened, now shorter episodes. So the Big League Club has won 7 of 9, sneakily going into the break. With a win today against the Astros, it's now 7 of 9. So now you ask the question, and we talked to Bob Stelton about this last week on our episode, and it's a good question. So I thought it is appropriate now at the end of the first half to bring this up again. When can we qualify the Mariners as buyers with less than a month to go before the deadline?
It's a good question. And just to clarify before we dive into this, now that we are doing the 2 shows a week, instead of doing the 3 Mariner storylines over the course of a 1-week show, we're going to do 2 Mariner storylines per episode, now doing 2-a-week shows. So it's 4 total Mariner storylines per week. So for this show, we'll do 2, Friday we'll do 2, so on and so forth. Back to your question. How far within that final wild card spot do they have to be within to be buyers is how I'm trying to think about this. They're 4 out right now. If they're 3 out with a week before the deadline, that should qualify as being buyers, right? If you're 3 out of the wild card with 2 months to go, you're absolutely in striking distance. And if that's where they are, I think you have to be buying. I think you have to go get a couple bats. I mean, am I wrong for that?
Along those lines, yes, but I think it's less necessarily of what those teams already in those spots that you have to gain on do and more about what you do out of the break. There's a pretty notable 10-game home stretch right out of the break against the Tigers. I have the 3 teams written down.
The Blue Jays is another.
And the Twins.
Mm-hmm.
Twins? Yeah, those are the 3, right?
Yeah.
And 2 of those teams are ahead of you in the standings. 10 straight games at home out of the break. You should win, 7 or 8 of those. If you want to slam dunk, be a buyer out of the break. That dumps you around the exact date, I think around the 25th of July, which is less than a week before the deadline. You need to rip off a great 10-game stretch at home, I think, to stamp yourself as confident buyers, not like a little futuristic trade where Jerry's like, oh, this guy's gonna help us in the future. No, if they're going to actually go out and acquire something of impact, I think you really need to make a statement in this first homestand out of the break. This is what happens when you play 500 throughout the first half and the deadline's creeping up on you. You say, why are we making decisions based off 10 games? Well, they're essentially 500 now through the first nearly 90 games of the season. And you got to show some separation if you're actually going to go out and actually going to buy and actually feel confident it's worth giving up some of your prized prospects to go get major league talent. So I'm calling it 7 or 8 out of the first 10 out of the break to actually stamp themselves as buyers.
6 probably is not enough, 6 out of 10, because winning 6 out of 10 on this homestand is too similar to everything else they've done in the first half. That's too much treading water, and we're getting to the point in the season where they cannot continue to tread water if they want to make the postseason. You have to actually take advantage and motor through some of these teams if you want to climb your way up the standings, make a statement, actually gain momentum, and get closer and closer to that final wild card spot. So you're right. At home against teams that are ahead of you and the Tigers, you have to take advantage. I think 7 of 10 is the minimum if you are absolutely serious about being buyers. Now, I think if they're 3 out with a week to go, no matter what happens, they should be going for it no matter what. Just get yourself in, and that rotation can give you a chance in the playoffs. But if you really want to sell the team, the front office, the fans, everybody, that this is still a team that can compete, yeah, 7 of 10 this upcoming homestand should be the bar.
I know that Blue Jays series is going to drive me crazy. Like the Canadians are going to drive me crazy, and it's going to be the biggest series of the season. You're going to be playing a road game in your home park with at that point, I'm going to guess is going to be the biggest series of the season.
For sure. And there's going to be a bunch of blue and red in that stadium, which is not going to be fun. Here's a question for you as we start to wind down on this first topic. Can the Mariners trade Tom Murphy and still be buyers? Can they say we can ship him off to get prospects back in return, but still buy elsewhere? Or do you have to hold on to Murphy to be buyers?
I don't think that would be a good idea. I don't think so. Because I don't think, thinking about it a little bit more after we talked about it, I think last week, of if it would be worth it to trade Tom Murphy. And I threw out some remember Ostanola? But the thing I somehow forgot is that Ostanola had at least 4 years of control left when the Mariners traded him. Tom Murphy does not have 4 years of control left. That's pretty significant when it comes to trading prospects. So when it comes to trading someone with 4 years of control, it's I'd be a little more comfortable giving up a better prospect because should be getting 4 years out of this guy. Well, they're only getting 2 months out of Tom Murphy, whoever would get him. That doesn't lead to much prospect return for the Mariners. Nothing that would actually be of impact this season and potentially even next season. I mean, you'd be asking for a total flyer if you were actually going to win that trade. The way the Mariners lineup looks, it has been swinging better lately, but I do not think you can trade Tom Murphy. He honestly, outside of the guy we're going to talk about next, is your best option at DH. You got to score runs. There still hasn't been enough guys in the lineup to say, hey, we're comfortable trading away Cal's backup. Second of all, who's coming up?
Chef?
Cooper Hummel's not. Chef, yeah, sure. But no offense to Chef, is he going to put up the Tom Murphy offensive numbers? Probably not.
That's probably fairly. I mean, it's certainly not right away. I mean, Tom Murphy over the last month has been a legit offensive catalyst. So, yeah, I mean, there's catchers in the system, right? There's Brian O'Keefe, there's Cooper Hummel. But you're right. To ask those guys to do what Tom Murphy's currently doing is not realistic. So if you're going to go and try and win, yeah, you should keep Tom Murphy. So I'm with you. I just wanted to pose the question to see what your 2 cents on it was. But I think if you're going for it, you've got to keep that guy to be your DH, to be a good bench bat, to be the backup catcher, because he's too valuable right now to ship off.
I think you would see a reaction similar to what happened when Graveman got traded in 21. Now, Graveman, the trade itself was the right idea, but the reaction will be, I would say, almost similar, because Murphy has actually provided good value for you this season and is a value contributor of this baseball team. You cannot say you're going to win and trade away valuable pieces that detriment your roster just because, he's going to be a free agent. Well, that doesn't help you right now.
I agree. They've got to keep Tom Murphy if they want to try and win. You want to bring him back next year? I know he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season, but you want to bring him back? Guess what? He's probably not going to be that expensive, and he likes it here. So if they really want to bring Tom Murphy back to be the backup catcher next year, they probably can. So if that's the case, you just keep him.
And you know it's a way not to bring him back is if you trade him and he's like, what the fuck?
Correct. Now, speaking of guys that have been hitting lately and a team that's been hitting lately, has anybody been in the headlines more than Mike Ford?
No. I couldn't believe he's hitting 400 his last, what is it, since the 24th? 410. We hate batting average, but that's a bizarre number. 410 average, 255 WRC plus since the 24th of June. Only Mookie has been better over that stretch. He's ahead of guys like Matt Olson, Shohei, and Ronald Acuna. I mean, come on.
So this is our second storyline here is Mike Ford is on an absolute tear. Through 30 games, or entering today's game, he was at 30 games with the Mariners this year. And it was a 953 OPS, 163 WRC plus. And as you mentioned just a second ago, since June 24th, it's way over 200. Not to mention, Mike Ford has not been all or nothing. This guy's walking over 12% of the time. He's only striking out about 25% of the time since the 24th of June. He is not just flailing out and running up a 40% strikeout rate. He has been a good hitter with a lot of power, and he's been the Carlos Santana of this year, if not better, over this 30-game stretch.
It's just, have you looked at how much of the production he's put in the DH spot? It's really bizarre. He already has half the total home runs in the DH spot, and he's played a quarter of the games at DH. Like, if that isn't sad, I really don't know what is. Maybe a dog dying. That's probably the only thing that's sadder for me personally. RBIs as well. It's just bizarre. He's the only player in the DH spot with over an 800 OPS who has had more than 10 plate appearances at the position. The only one of your DH where it's like, okay, we want you to have an 800 OPS. And he's the only one with 10 plate appearances in that spot with an OPS over 800.
It just makes me wonder, should he have made the opening day roster? In other words, I wonder how much the Tacoma at-bats actually made the difference this year or not, because we know how Tacoma is. We know how the PCL is. Could Mike Ford have just been doing this since early April, or was it truly being in Tacoma that helped him?
Oh, that's a good question. To be honest, after watching the DHs in April, I would have said he probably should have made the roster pretty confidently. It's not like he was struggling much in Tacoma. Take it with a grain of salt, but when you're hitting as well as he did in Tacoma, are you getting better or are you just hitting well?
That's probably right. The point being, he has been a legitimate savior for the Mariners offense. I mean, I know they didn't win that game in Baltimore, but the fact he hit that home run off Felix Bautista down to their last out and reties that game, the fact that now when you have him in the DH spot, you look at that position and say, oh, they could get some production today. It is not a dead spot in the lineup. And the offense just feels so much more rounded out with much more potential for power with Ford in there. You feel good about him being in there.
I want him to just let him hit against lefties now. I'm like, the option, unless it's Tom Murphy against a lefty, which they won't always do because they like having a backup catcher behind Cal. If you're asking me if I'd rather see AJ Pollock or Mike Ford against, I don't know, pick your star lefty. I mean, Framber pitched today, but let's just say Framber. Who would you rather see? I mean, at this rate, I'd say, Mike Ford.
Yeah. Well, Framber pitched yesterday being Saturday, but close enough.
Oh, right. Yeah. All right. It all melts together. But pick your lethal left-hander from anywhere in the American League, and you'd ask me, do I want this version of AJ Pollock or this version of Mike Ford? And Mike Ford has given me no reason to bench him against lefties.
If the Mariners play the Rays in the playoffs and Shane McClanahan's on the mound, I would sit here and tell you I'd rather have Mike Ford in the lineup.
Absolutely. That's not even a question. So credit to you, Fordo. And of course, among all those people I listed off here that he's been better than since the 24th of June, Matt Olson, Shohei, Ronald Acuna, they're all very good baseball players, but they don't have an Ivy League degree. So Ford's got them beaten both. And
they're not a friend of this podcast like Mike Ford now is.
Correct. Great guy, Mike Ford. Great guy. So we appreciate Mike Ford. So this is another plug to just stay tuned to our social channels because we'll have some more Mike Ford content coming out throughout the next couple of weeks. So Look out for it.
Yeah,
Look out for it.
he was great. I mean, he stood there. He was funny. He gave great answers. I mean, he was really cool. So, and he seemed happy to do it. So shout out to Fordo. Is it a coincidence that he just happens to be going off after doing these interviews? I'll leave that up to debate.
Yeah, that is up for the viewer to decide if you subscribe to conspiracy theories. Let's go a little younger as we appreciate Fordo, and let's go down on the farm. I thought in this segment here today, we did talk about it a little bit at the beginning, but we can hash it out a little bit. The Futures game was on Saturday, which was yesterday for us and a few days ago when you're listening to this. In terms of Mariners prospect stuff, it was mostly a day to forget. A couple of strikeouts from Clase and Ford, and that was the only action essentially they saw the entire game.
Jonatan Clase made a nice catch in center field. I'll give him that. So that was cool. But in terms of what they did at the plate, there wasn't much. Harry Ford only got one at bat, to be fair. And I said before the start of the at bat, I am going to call that he walks, because what do we always talk about with Harry Ford? His on base percentage is always at 400. Great plate approach, walks a lot. I figured, well, he'll probably walk in the Futures game. That'd probably be on brand. But he got it to a 3-2 count and he struck out. So you're right. There's not that much to update from the Futures game. It was cool to see Clase make a nice catch, but there were no balls leaving the yard off the bat of Ford or Clase.
The thing that was honestly most intriguing of the Futures game, we were sitting pretty close to the field. And you could really get the size of some of these guys. Seeing James Wood up there at the plate, I think he clocked a sprint speed there of like over 30 feet per second, which was pretty bananas. That dude is unbelievable. I can't believe he was a throw-in for the Soto trade. That just kind of makes me laugh. I think Washington made out okay with that one. Spencer Jones as well. That dude's also pretty tall. He was at Bandy last year. Seeing him step up to the plate, like, oh, he's kind of taller than everyone else. There's one guy, I guess, non-Mariners, Lyle, that I wanted to highlight here because I thought it was super cool. Jacob, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Mizorowski, I think, of the Brewers. Mm-hmm. He was just torching guys. He touched, I think, 102.5. He threw 10 of his 18 pitches over 100 miles an hour. And his stuff was moving. It was not flat. It was going all over the place.
So I had no idea who this dude was before he entered the game yesterday. I looked it up. So he's part of the Brewers system. Second rounder. I think he was a JUCO guy. I don't know much about him. He was a pretty lengthy kid when he got up on the mound. And we're sitting at the game watching with all the Just Baseball guys. We met up before the game, all sat together and watched the game. And a couple of these guys, as he's warming up, are saying, this guy's throwing cheddar. And I don't think they had the velos up on the radar gun yet at the stadium. So I couldn't tell that much either, just off the eye, whether it was 94 or 99. But then he starts throwing in live action. And the radar gun's popping up 101, 100, 102, 101. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, that guy's unreal. I don't know when he's getting up for the Brewers, but that guy's going to be a back-end reliever real quick, and he's going to be mighty effective.
He was nasty. So that was probably the highlight of the day for me. Otherwise, it was cool seeing all the really highly touted prospects. But a 7-inning prospects game for me personally is just kind of a shoulder shrug. You see the Mariners guys, and you kind of gawk at all the other prospects. But in the end, it was essentially just a showcase. No more than the celebrity softball game was, where we saw just only slightly worse play on the field.
Well, as we get into our MLB wraparound here, let's dive into the celebrity softball game. So JoJo Siwa, I'll give her 70 grade run, maybe 50 grade arm. Who else are we going to give grades to here? Joel McHale has some power potential. Could go from 40 grade power to 50 grade power as time goes on. He's gonna have to hit the weight room a little bit, but power could go up.
Mike Cameron trying a little bit too hard. It's like, yeah, dude, you're an ex-baseball player. Like, take it easy on some of these celebs who would look like they'd never picked up a bat before.
Oh, we still only got to watch 2 innings of that celebrity softball game. I would have loved to watch more.
Better things to do.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. But Futures game was cool. Saturday as a whole was cool. I think we should get to our actual MLB wraparound here. As we do that, there are some storylines in baseball leading up to the All-Star break and All-Star week. One of them being a team in our own division, the AL West. The Angels have injuries piling up yet again.
What a 4th of July it was for the Angels. I mean, think about this timeline. 11:45 in the morning, Mike Trout, they announce he fractured the hamate bone in his wrist, and he gets placed on the injured list. Anthony Rendon at 4:40 p.m. Pacific fouled the ball off his left leg and leaves the game. He has not played in a game since then. 5:30, Shohei exits off the mound. He has a blister. He's not going to pitch in the All-Star game, and they're expecting him to make his next start on the 15th against the Astros. But in the span of about a little over 5 hours, the Angels season nearly ended.
It's not great. And now they're floating around 500 again. I don't know where their season's going to go from here, because you have Trout down for 6 to 8 weeks. That can tank your season. Not to mention the fact that they have other injuries now too. This is not good news for the Halos.
Rendon, Rendon stunk this season, but it's unsure if he's going to be back after the All-Star break. He wasn't given a super optimistic look to his injury. Blisters sometimes are a worry, sometimes aren't with pitchers. It really depends on the pitcher. But Shohei, again, thankfully this All-Star break for him comes at the right time, so a little bit more time for his blister to rest. And thankfully, when you're as good as Shohei Ohtani, you can still, just go hit, which is very convenient of him. How nice. Why can't other pitchers think of that? Otherwise, Brandon Drury is also out, a guy who, in another subject here in the wraparound, to look at the All-Star game rosters, but he could have been at first, he could have been at second base, made the All-Star team for how he's played this season at second for the Angels, but he's been out as well. And now we sit here on Sunday, July 9th, and the Angels have gone 4-12 since June 20th and have fallen behind the Mariners.
So is Shohei getting traded?
No. Who's going to trade for him? What team would commit the resources necessary to get Ohtani off the Angels?
Oh, I think someone would trade for him. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think somebody would.
No contender is going to make themselves arguably worse by trading for him. Because I honestly think that's the kind of package it would take to land Ohtani. We're not talking about prospects. We're talking about big leaguers. That's what it would require. And contenders don't trade big leaguers when they're contending. It doesn't matter who it's for.
Does it get to the point where the Angels would actually bring down the asking price a little bit and just try to get some high-level prospects back? Because in what world is Ohtani coming back at this point? If all these injuries pile up and the Angels finish the year at or below 500, he's not staying. I don't even think he's staying now, but he's sure as hell not staying if they finish below 500. Don't you want something back for him?
And I can tell you he sure as hell isn't staying if you trade him.
He's not staying if you don't trade him. That's why I'm saying if you're the Angels, I think you have to try and get something back.
He still might stay. I'm putting at about 5% because he likes being comfortable. 5%. But that 5% goes to zero. Now, the question is, do the Angels value 5% more than some prospects?
That's a bad bet if they do. So maybe he doesn't get traded, but if I were a GM and I was in this position now, I'd probably do it.
I wouldn't sell low. Why? I can't see the Angels selling low on that. I mean, you have quite literally the most valuable asset in baseball, and I'm not sure why you'd make a bad deal on that. I don't get it.
That's fair. I guess we'll see how things play out as the trade deadline gets closer and closer. You're probably right that in the end, he doesn't end up getting traded. I just think it's now more and more interesting with all the injuries piling up if they might start to reconsider it. But again, we'll see how it all shakes out.
Let's transition to our next storyline. This will result for when you're listening to this for last night's All-Star game. But we haven't really got a chance to react to the All-Star game rosters. So I'll throw it to you, Lyle. Taking a look at the rosters, what do you think?
Why isn't Whit Merrifield leading off and playing all 9 innings?
That is a good question. I'm looking at it, and I really, the only 2 question marks I had on it overall are both Blue Jays. Whit, first of all, it is kind of a weak American League second base class. I will give it that. If we're looking by WRC+, I believe after you take Drury out because he's hurt, he is second in the American League in WRC plus as a second baseman. It's not a very high mark, but he is like, hitting wise second. It helps he plays a weak position. The one who we should actually be like wondering, like, what the fuck is this? Why is Vladdy in there? He's not an all-star this year.
He's not, but would people of other fan bases and teams say the same thing about Julio?
Julio's been way better than Vladdy has. Julio's been worth over 2 wins. Vladdy's at like half a win.
Yeah, that one seems like a stretch. I mean, I don't know why Vladdy didn't want to do the Derby again this year. That could have been his way to get to All-Star Week and still participate in the festivities. But that one's a stretch, Vladdy.
And he's a guy. He didn't get fan voted in. They put him on the roster.
Yeah, exactly. He was a late ad. So, and they did it probably for similar reasons that they made sure to get Julio in, even though, like you said, Julio's still on pace for just shy of 5 wins. He's still probably going to finish the year with 25 bombs and 35 plus stolen bases. But yeah, it's a little bit of a pander pick to get Vladdy in because they're trying to get all the stars in, the popular guys in.
If you don't believe, like, literally go to Fangraphs and click on first baseman. It's bizarre. I honestly didn't even realize how low he was on the list. It's crazy. All these guys are in front of him, but people like to complain about this stuff. That's why I don't want to like look too much into this, because like in the end, we're going to bitch about the All-Star rosters every single year because people are going to put favorites in, and that's just what it is. We realized it this week as we're walking around All-Star Week. Like, we said, well, Julio probably doesn't deserve to get into this All-Star game. And me and you are looking around, it's like, wow, they have a lot of really big banners of Julio around here. What were they going to do with these if he didn't make it?
That was never a possibility, was it, for MLB? They were getting him in one way or another.
I'm like, yeah, it's great. I mean, there is literally, like, we took a photo next to it, a 20-foot tall poster with Julio on top of Mookie when you walk into the MLB, what is it, the park? The
play ball park.
Play ball park. Right. As you walk in, I mean, 20 feet tall of Julio. Like, where were they going to put that? And they're like, oh, man, we're going to have to put someone else on here now.
Those were my other 2 takeaways. Was one, we haven't done a podcast since the announcement that George Kirby and Julio were both added in. So obviously, congratulations to them. That's awesome. George Kirby is every bit deserving to be in that game. I thought he should have been in originally, but the fact they got him in period is what's important. The other thing is all 3 original starting outfielders in the American League are not starting. Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, Yordan Alvarez. They're not playing.
And I think the replacements, though, I think they got them right.
Yeah, I think so. I think with the outfield, they did a good job.
Yeah, I know people have been like, I honestly didn't even realize how good of a year Adolis is having. So, I mean, it is kind of like a knife twist for Mariner fans, but at least for some of us, not maybe for a different faction of Mariner fans, that the Rangers are going to get so many starters in their own ballpark. But to be honest, I think all those guys deserve to, be a prominent role in the All-Star game. So, credit to them. They did it.
Should we talk about the NL at all? Just some thought about the NL, because I just realized all our talk there was about American League guys. I thought it was interesting Kodai Senga got added because that's an exciting guy to have in the All-Star game. He's had his ups and downs as a rookie for sure, which is expected, but to see that Ghost Fork on live display here in Seattle in the big event at the All-Star game, I think will be a really cool one. So late edition, and he's not the feature guy of the National League team, but that was one that stood out to me.
I didn't have as many takeaways with the National League. I mean, interesting that Josiah Gray made it. I know the Nationals had to put him in, but Josiah Gray wasn't very good at all. I feel like there's probably someone else they could have put in on the Nationals. But otherwise, this is a pretty solid group of guys on this National League roster. Even starting wise, you could have maybe a little bit of beef with no, that's reserve. I think Orlando Arcia. Yeah, Orlando Arcia is starting the All-Star game, which you could probably beef at. But otherwise, I thought Nolan was having more of a down season than he is. He's honestly not. Third base is having a down offensive year overall as a position. So Nolan put himself back in that starting spot. Freeman, Rise, Murphy, those are all right. Corbin starting in the park he grew up going to, super cool. And Mookie and Ronald, I mean, no one's going to complain about that. It's going to be really interesting who the starting pitchers are going to be. I'm very curious to see when they announce those. We don't know those yet. But overall, National League, I thought they did a pretty good job.
I think the two gripes with the NL are, to your Nationals point, I think a lot of people thought Lane Thomas could have gotten in, and I agree with that. I think he could have gotten in over Josiah Gray for sure. I think Mets fans are less than thrilled that Geraldo Perdomo got in over Francisco Lindor. That one is interesting.
Yeah, that one was interesting too. Lindor, he hasn't hit as well this year as he did last year, but his defense is so good that his value continues to be about as high as it possibly could be. He has been worth every penny of that contract so far.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one last thought. I know it's within the rules, but I don't care. Fernando Tatis should be in this All-Star game. I know because he got popped for steroids that he's not in. He should be in.
He should be starting.
Yeah. Dude's now the best right fielder in baseball. He's barely played any right field.
The best athletes always continue to be the best. And so you could say, it's not a true National League outfield without Fernando Tatis in it. It's not. He's amazing. He is amazing. Remember when we said the Mariners should trade for him? That was fun. That was fun.
Padres fans are not happy about that.
No, they're not. But hey, you know what? I can't blame him, man. He seems to be fitting in the outfield perfectly fine. Let's close out this wraparound. Tigers combined for their first no-hitter in history. And I know everyone was just popping confetti to celebrate it.
The Tigers needed something in their season, didn't they? I mean, it's not like it's all roses over there at Comerica Park. So it was nice for them to have a nice moment. Matt Manning, who certainly has not had the start of a career that he probably imagined as a top 10 prospect, he did the bulk of the work. He went 6 2/3 innings, 5 strikeouts. Jason Foley and Alex Lang came in to finish the job. But it's nice for them to have a moment. Again, they have not had many highlights in this season.
I couldn't believe for as historic of a franchise the Tigers are, they've never had a combined no-hitter. I thought that was a fun little note. Sarah Langs of MLB.com put together a cool little history packet of that no-hitter. So pretty cool, and I was shocked. Only the 20th combined no-hitter in baseball history. Again, I thought there would have been more, but to be honest, I think most of them have come since 2011, which is pretty interesting. So good on the Tigers getting that no-hitter, unless you have anything else to add.
That's the second no-hitter of this season total, right? The other one being, I don't think we've done a podcast since Domingo Germán's perfect game, which would be the other. Those are the only two so far this year, right?
Really couldn't happen to a better guy.
Yeah, for real. That was not a fun day because that was the same day. It was one of those Nationals games. Was it the day that Patrick Corbin just carved him up?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds about right.
So what a day that Patrick Corbin, maybe the worst starter in baseball, just carves up the Mariners lineup in a game they absolutely should have won after a miserable loss the night before in that extra inning game against the Nationals. And to top it off, Felix Hernandez's perfect game streak gets snapped by a guy who is not very easy to root for.
No, a domestic abuser. So, and he did it against not a Major League Baseball team too. So does it even count?
Let's go with no, even though we're absolutely counting Bryce Miller's dominant start in his debut against the A's. No, we're going to be biased and say Domingo's doesn't count. It's like the 2020 titles. They don't count.
That works for me. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Okay, let's get to our Russell Wilson Umpire of the Week. Lyle, would you like to bring this one in?
Sure. So let's give a hat tip and a nice congratulations to Shane Livensparger. He is this week's winner. He was behind the plate on Saturday, that was July 8th, for the Rockies-Giants game. He received an accuracy score that ranked as the 7th worst score of the entire season. He called 79% of his strikes right. League average is 88%. He missed 11 total strike calls in this game. 11. And this is your job.
Now, I'm going to take a different turn with this segment. Ready for this? This might blow your mind. Did you know the overall accuracy of this game, right, was 87%. That snapped Shane Livensparger's streak of consecutive game where the overall average of correct calls was over 90%. He did that for 94 games in a row, the seventh longest streak all time. So this outing was honestly a rarity for Shane Livensparger.
Oh, so this guy's actually a good ump and he just had one bad day?
Yes.
Oh, well, now I feel kind of bad. Because okay, so as much trashing on umpires as we do, there are the Pat Hobergs of the world who is the best umpire in baseball, who is spot on with his strike zone almost always. There are good ones out there, but the reason we obviously do this segment is because more often than not, there are plenty of stories that are very worthy of being put in the spotlight of umpires trying to be part of the show. All right, maybe Shane Livensparger just had a bad day.
Now, let me frame it this way. We had to highlight his streak. Somehow we wouldn't have talked about it on the podcast unless he had a bad day. So this is a way to honestly promote the good umpires.
Okay, so it honors Shane Livensparger. We're doing a full 180 of this in a spin zone. Can I just say, though?
Another 94 games in a row, Mr. Livensparger.
Yes. Now, can I just say, speaking of 11 missed strike calls, going back to sitting at the Futures game this week, also because I've watched a few games in Tacoma this year when I visited our friend Jeremy, who works with the Mariners, and he's with the Rainiers this year. The challenge system works, and it works really well. They were literally using it at T-Mobile Park for the Futures game on Saturday. The technology is there. It works. And guess what? Players know when they get robbed. These guys are not just asking for the challenge after every pitch. They know when a call's wrong because they are that good at knowing the strike zone. So guess what? If it's working in the minors, why is it not here in the big leagues right now?
Didn't you get a good chuckle? I forget who's at the plate. The first challenge of the game, I mean, the ball was at least 6 inches above the strike zone, if not more. And they showed it on the big screen. And you could hear a collective laugh from the entire crowd.
Yeah. I mean, that one was bad. But point being, if the technology's there, why are we not already using it? The umpires and Major League Baseball decided, hey, halfway through the 2021 season, we're going to change the rules right in the middle of the year where pitchers can't use sticky stuff and spider tack anymore. You can change things in the middle of the year. Why aren't we doing things for the greater good and bringing in the challenge system right now?
Because it's too logical.
That's about right. Absolutely, it's too logical. One day, though, one day. Okay, let's close out the show here. Let's get to Speak Your Mind. There could be a million things you're thinking about this week, TJ, but what is it?
I know you're going to enjoy this one. I thought, man, there's a ton of baseball things we could talk about, but we talked a lot about baseball throughout the day and on this podcast and outside of our segments too. So I thought, okay, we need a change of pace. When in doubt, what do we need to talk about? Now, the NBA is over, but I have gotten the biggest laugh ever. The fact that I am reading headlines when I scroll on Twitter that Skip Bayless has to take 2 months off because he cannot find a replacement to debate him on Undisputed. And it's the least shocking thing ever.
I swear, people listen to Speak Your Mind at this point, and we always talk about, yeah, it's our segment of the show where we get away from baseball and just talk about whatever we're thinking about. And to be fair, you're getting a key to our brains here, and you're unlocking what's in our head by you, the listeners, listening to this segment. However, that being said, you're taken away probably after months of doing this being, wow, these guys talk a lot about Elon, the NBA, and Skip Bayless.
Yeah, pretty much. But he has to, I can't, he's like, man, it's too difficult to find a replacement for Skip Bayless. It is too hard to find somebody willing to get paid millions of dollars to sit across the table from Skip. I mean, I would do that. Sign me up. No offense, Lyle, but I would quit this podcast in a second, put my suit on, and you skip. LeBron is the greatest of all time.
Oh, if Skip had me across the desk and started spewing about LeBron, I'd just totally change the subject on him and be, yeah, but Skip, Shohei Ohtani's WRC plus is approaching 180. Now, what do you think of that, buddy? And then he'd just be left silent.
My turn.
Okay, but what do you think about Jared Kelnick's hard hit rate? It's up,
It's my turn. LeBron sucks.
I just try to make him look stupid by using like in-depth advanced stats baseball logic on him and try to make him look stupid.
When was the last time they used a stat on that show? Do they use
Probably
stats?
never. Probably
Besides
never. But
rings?
probably never. But I don't know. Like, who watches that show? I don't watch that show.
No, I'd love to see what their live numbers are on television. I don't know how they honestly stay on network television. I don't know how it's just not like a YouTube show.
Yeah, because nobody is sitting down eating their breakfast. It's one thing when you say you're going to sit down, eat your breakfast in the morning, turn on SportsCenter. You're going to turn on the news. You're going to turn on Kelly and Ryan. My mom watches that all the time. Nobody is sitting down, eating their breakfast, and getting their daily intake of sports news from Undisputed.
No, not at all. But I thought that was funny. I was like, man, who could have seen this coming?
Yeah. Who could have seen it coming that, oh, maybe Skip Bayless isn't so fun to work with? I mean, hey, he called out Charles Barkley to be his new host, but I don't think that's happening.
I mean, think about the requirements to essentially be in a quote-unquote relationship with Skip as his co-host. Think about what his wife has to go through. They do not sleep in the same bed in the middle of the week because he says he needs to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, and he gets up at 2 a.m. to start working out because if he doesn't, he's gonna have a bad day at work and let Shannon Sharp just run all over him, as he puts it. Even though I'm sure you'd be more rested if you didn't get up at 2 a.m.
He did a whole podcast episode because he missed a workout. Sounds kind of like you, dog.
Oh,
maybe a little bit.
Let's not. Bit. Yeah, I don't like the idea that's where this is going with trying to make the comps between me and Skip Bayless, because guess what? I consider myself a very nice person and friendly and willing to talk to just about anybody. I don't know if Skip's like that, but if you're trying to draw comps in the sense of, well, you guys watch a lot of sports, you like to work out. I mean, like
get up early in the morning to work out is, I think, what I was getting at.
Yeah, I don't like where these similarities are going. So why don't we just shut it down right there? Because I don't want to be compared to Skip Bayless. So
what's on your mind, dog?
Okay, little bit of a different topic here. Still somewhat sports related, but not exactly. So we didn't talk about this on the last show, but that Michael Rubin party that he threw was just insanity. I mean, if you watch the 1.5-minute recap of it that he posted on Twitter, it's almost overwhelming how many famous people and A-list celebrities are in that video. I mean, you want to list off the athletes. It goes from people like Kylian Mbappe to Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Hey, nice to see Kevin Durant got off Twitter to go to that party, by the way. To a bunch of NFL stars like Odell and Tom Brady and Robert Kraft. And then you see Kim Kardashian, you see Jack Harlow, you see Jay-Z. I mean, it was literally insane. It felt like every famous person on the planet was at that party. It was almost overwhelming.
And Grant Williams is there too.
Oh, that's a little bit of a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. I see parties like that and I wonder, like, man, how many world problems could happen if like this group of people like decided to do something? Just fun to think about.
It is. Here's the exercise I was using to think about after seeing that. Now think about this question hard, because I did. Would it be fun to be that famous or no?
Depends where your priorities are in life, I guess. Depends what your goals are. Depends what you value and what makes you happy.
Because does
money and attention and fame make you happy?
Maybe, and I'm not saying the money part is the part that you wouldn't like. I'm sure everybody would like to have a ton of money. But what I'm getting at is those people at that party, for the most part, probably cannot walk outside their house without getting mobbed by fans. So does that get old after a certain amount of time? I feel like maybe. Like, you can't even go to the store on your own.
Well, I think the digits in their bank account more than make up for it. I do kind of get the human sense you're talking about there, but, you know, I kind of struggle to find remorse in that. I mean, I do. I mean, we are talking about like the 1% of the 1% of athlete and influencer and just person like on this planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, maybe a tiny little shred of remorse for that, but that's probably all you'll get from me, because it did look fun. I will say it did look like an absolute blast. I have no idea where that house is. Looked like an unbelievable location, and the video was just insane. Seeing all the people, and I still can't get over the fact that they invited Grant Williams. That's just such a random invite in that group of like some of the greatest, like most influential figures of all time.
I think Sterling Shepard was there too. Isn't that a little bit of a weird one?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think Sterling Shepard is in that group.
I don't either. Also, I think the house was in the Hamptons. Big shocker.
Oh, massive shocker.
So that's what I was thinking about. I just thought, one, it was pretty insane to see all those celebrities all in one spot. But two, I was just thinking about, would it be fun to be that famous or not? So debate it for yourselves, because I think it's actually an interesting topic. With that, that'll just about wrap up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know by now, or if you're a new listener coming over from the Just Baseball side and wanted to check us out and you don't know, you can find our full audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. If you want the full video podcast, that's on YouTube. They're all on YouTube. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, give us 5 stars, help us beat the algorithm, and go check out our social media channels as well. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. For TJ Mathewson, this is Lyle Goldstein. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.